Good morning. Today is the 5th day of second Adar, the 15th of March. And isn't 15th of March the Ides of March?
I was thinking when the Ides of March were.
It's the 15th, I think. Yeah. So Caesar is killed today or something? Anyway. So we were talking about this yesterday about Tzimtzum. Let's just finish this small section. And what we had was that prior to creation there is but God alone. God as he is in himself is called Ein Sof, the infinite. He is without limit. Of God as Ein Sof, nothing can be postulated except that he is Ein Sof, that he is infinite. And here they don't mean infinite. You certainly don't mean infinite in the sense that it's not finite. You just mean that it's without description. And then he quotes here from Tikkunei Zohar, of course. High above all heights and hidden beyond all concealments, no thought can grasp you at all. You have no known name, for you fill all names, and you are the perfection of them all. What he means by you fill all names is that each one of the names that are considered to be sacred, that you can't erase, inside of them, we say the names are just like a vessel. Even the names are just a vessel. And inside of them is God's essence. In a mystical way, rather difficult to explain, there is a manifestation of self-revelation of God qua Ein Sof, even before the act of creation. So we talked about this yesterday in length. I'm not going to repeat it again, even though we didn't tape it. This manifestation is called Or Ein Sof, the light of the infinite, or the revelation of the infinite. And we speak of this light as equally omnipresent and infinite. This distinction between Ein Sof and Or Ein Sof is extremely important, must be kept in mind. Why? For when speaking of Tzimtzum and the Sfirot, we relate these to the Or Ein Sof, the light and radiation, rather than to the luminary and radiator, the Ma'or, who is the Ein Sof. Okay, so this is what we did yesterday, even though it wasn't taped. Sorry. Now it says, when it arose in the divine will, and this is taken from She'ala B'Ritzono. It's from Eitz Chaim. To bring about the world and the creatures, the first act in the creative process was to bring about space in which the divine emanations and ultimately the evolving finite world could have a place to exist. When you say space, what do you mean? You mean that somehow Hashem, instead of expanding, is now contracting. And so then we follow this thing we talked about yesterday, we began to talk about yesterday, that before you can create, or before we can do anything, we learn this from ourselves. It's not like, this is not some, the Ari, the Revised Luria, he didn't find a book where it said this. He learned this from himself, except we say that the way that he learns from himself, every person who hears it realizes that this is some kind of revelation. It's not a regular type of a person saying, I feel hungry, or I feel like this, or like that. It's a generalization of what it means to be a human being. And from that, you understand that this is coming from how God created the world. This is the way we are, because we're like this is because, again, we're some kind of image of God. We're some kind of projection, let's call it, of God. So what were the stages? The stages was, first of all, that you have to have attraction. Attraction means that you're attracted to your future role. In this case, God is attracted, as it were, to becoming God, to becoming creator.
What do you mean becoming?
Creator, because there's no creation yet. So you have to covet, you have to want to be a creator. You have to want to be this thing.
But he's already God.
Yeah, but he's not a creator.
Okay.
He's perfect in some way, but there's no creation yet. So the creation is the answer to his now attraction to becoming a creator.
You mean it's a deep, it's more...
It's a revelation.
Yeah, but...
When we say it in a person, it's very clear. I have within me, some people say like, why do I have a special relationship with my firstborn? Because he made me into a father. What do you mean he made you into a father? You weren't a father before? I was a father before. It wasn't revealed yet. I had these qualities. I had these abilities. I love them very much. I'm attracted to them. Even when I got married, I was hoping that they would come out because I knew, and my wife, before she married me, she looked at me and she says, "Oh, he's really good with kids."
You mean it's more God perfected himself, so to speak?
No, he revealed himself. He didn't add anything. He just revealed it.
Okay.
It's a very important thing that he doesn't add anything. He only reveals what was already there. So he reveals his role as a creator, and then that role fills everything. That's what we said, that the infinite light fills everything before. And that's what the Rizal says. First, before anything was created, the light of the infinite, meaning the revelation of the infinite, filled all reality. What was the reality? There wasn't any reality, but the light was expansive. It filled everything. And then, like he says here, the next stage is that you have to create a space. That we call unconditional love. Why unconditional love? Because in Hebrew it makes a lot more sense, called Ahava she'inat tluya b'davar. It's not dependent on anything. In other words, he's now creating a space, and because he's creating this space, he's actually contracting himself. He's saying, I'm not the creator yet. I have to, in order to be the creator, I have to make room for creation. And that's a strange thing, but that's how it works. So before a person gets married, it's not about expanding, it's actually about nullifying yourself, about contracting. So if I go to get married, I say, I want to be a husband, I have these qualities, I want to bring them out. I'm interested in having this relationship with a woman. So, what are these qualities? Oh, I think about them for a year and now I say, I'm ready to get married. Then I find someone who wants to marry me. The next step is that I have to contract. I don't come in full force, I'm the husband. Well, not yet. In fact, in order to bring my wife in, I have to make a chuppah. And the chuppah is like an empty space around me, and I let her fill it. That's why she circles me 7 times. Like this whole idea is that I'm giving space for her. I'm making space for that which will become in a moment.
Some are very makpid to kona the place.
To what?
Kona the chuppah.
To do what?
To make an ownership.
Of course. It's
Yes.
halacha. It says in halacha that it's yours anyway.
Oh, okay.
It's in Gemara, it's yours anyway. It's chupat chatanim, it's called. In any case, same thing. We give the example of I go to learn some occupation. I first of all have an attraction to being that, and then I actually go learn it, and I have to make a lot of space for it. Because I'm not going to get anything from it in the beginning. It's just going to be tests and busy work and whatever it is, but I'm making room for it. Same thing if I want to become a musician. So I'm going to be practicing for a long, long time before I actually make any music. All these things, they require this stage of contraction. And he calls it, and it's called the primordial space. So this primordial space was brought about by a contraction or a withdrawal and concentration of divinity into itself. And again, what do we mean by divinity? We don't mean divinity. It's not like Hashem himself, because exactly that's what we want to say is not the case. When I make space for my wife, it's not like I lose weight. It has nothing to do with that. I remain exactly who I am. It's just that I'm not expanding. I'm not revealing myself. I'm making room. But to make room, I don't have to chop of pieces for myself. That's not how you make room. And the same thing, when Hashem made room, He didn't contract Himself, His divinity. He rather contracted the thought of becoming a king, the thought of becoming the creator. That contracted back and made room. And because there's so much room, we said that these are the first 2,000 years when people lived for a long, long time. Why did people live for such a long time? Because Hashem was very ma'arich af, it says. He was very patient. Because He's making room now. He's saying, that's where you get this from. This is where this idea comes from. So the omnipresent, infinite light of the Ein Sof, which we're explaining, is the thought of becoming a creator. The attraction to becoming a creator is now withdrawn into Himself. Not He Himself. It's this thought. It's this part of me. So this part of me that wanted to be a musician, I hold that off. I don't make appearances. I don't do gigs. I don't play in public. None of this. I'm now going to withdraw into myself, not entirely. I continue to go to the store and I continue to do everything normal, except for one thing. I'm not going to be playing things in public. That's not me yet. This is going to take time. This is going to take a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, each person depending on what they want, right? And during that time, my whole thought of myself as a musician is withdrawn into myself. It says the same thing by King David and King Saul, that they were anointed and it took another year for them to become the king. So it's explained in Chasidus. What did they do during that year? They made space. They made space in themselves for all the people that they would now have to lead. So for a year they sat, and the only thing they did was, they obviously they were anointed. They had this role now, and they contracted it completely. They withdrew completely, and brought back into themselves to make space for the people around them. That is, it was screened, dimmed, hidden, and concealed. Say all the words you want, doesn't matter. In the end, this projection of myself as being a musician, a father, a husband, a king, whatever it is now, it has to be withdrawn for a while, and that's called love that is not dependent on anything, or unconditional love. Where this occultation and concealment of the light occurred, an empty place, a void, makom panui, chalal, evolved into primordial space. And again, this is all, if you understand this physically, I don't know what would be the physical analogy. Like, what would it look like in the physical world? I'm sure there is. We said one example in the physical world. We said if you want to plant a tree, so you have to take a seed and you put it into the ground, and the seed rots. And so their whole dream is gone, as it were. It's withdrawn. But it's not really withdrawn. It's just going through that stage of becoming nothing in order to later develop. So it's making space, as it were. This is the act of the first tzimtzum. Why is it called the first tzimtzum? Because there are tzimtzumim afterwards. And this radical act of dilug and kfitza, as it were. And here he says, because when I want to create something physical, it's not just being withdrawn spiritually. It's much more than that. Here, and so we're confusing the two analogies now. The metaphor I'm using about a person wanting to become something is not an act like the first tzimtzum. But it follows the same pattern, but it's not the same thing. Because the first tzimtzum is mamash a dilug. It's mamash a gap. It's skipping over something. And we said we needed that because otherwise nothing physical can ever come out. An act of divine self-limitation, so to speak, as opposed to revelation. So that's why, because we want to create something physical, the difference between the physical and the spiritual is that spiritual is without limits, the physical is with limits. That's the definition of physical pretty much, that something has limits, it has borders, it has a contour, it has limits. So Hashem was before that, he was, I want to rule unlimitedly. So now, but if I want to create something physical, I have to recede all that unlimited revelation and make space for a limited revelation now. And that limited revelation is really the revelation of God's limited aspect. Say it another way. When the guy who wants to become a musician withdraws from playing in public, and now he's going to go practice for 2 years, during that time, it's not that he doesn't do any music, but the music he's doing is not the type of music that's going to come out later. In other words, he's going to be practicing, let's say you're practicing on classical guitar, so you're going to be practicing for a long, long time on producing notes. And this is not going to sound much like music, but it's notes. You are doing something. But that's a limited version of what will come later. So it's the same idea here, that the limited aspect of Hashem comes out. There's a lot to talk about this in Samach Vav. He explained this in length, and he has this whole concept of that it's even that when you're practicing, as it were, it's more you than when you're going to play for in a concert, for instance. Why? Because this is you, meaning this is you playing. When you play in front of an audience, you're not you. You're in a position. You're playing some kind of role. So it's less you. So there's a concept in Chasidus that says, "Hama'or nichnas bimkom ha'or," that when he withdrew, what was revealed was actually God himself. Not a revelation. Again, not I want to become creator, but who am I in general without becoming a creator? I hope this is understandable. Think about the example that when you see the musician practicing in his home, he's not a musician, he's just him. So his whole dream is like withdrawn because he now has to go through these actions in order to become a musician. But that's when you see him. Later, in 2 years, when he's finished and he's finished practicing, whatever, now he's going to get on stage, you're not going to see him. What you're going to see is a role that he's playing. And they look different.
Yeah. And it's different.
Yeah, they're completely different. They're people.
A whole different thing.
They're
He's
people.
different. It's a different...
Right, because when he's on stage, he's giving a show.
That's right.
The same thing is true about the world. In a certain sense, Hashem is giving us a show here. If I want to meet him, I have to meet him when he's withdrawn from being the creator. Yes. In any case. However, this does not mean that the halal is literally empty, like we just said, and void of all divine radiation, that the divine presence is literally and totally withdrawn therefrom. Such interpretation would suggest an illegitimate ascription of spatiality and hence corporeal reality to the infinite and violate the principle of omnipresence affirmed in the most literal sense by scripture and tradition. The halal is metaphorically spoken of as a void in relation to that which is beyond or outside the halal. Outside the halal, outside this void, there is a full manifestation of the Or Ein Sof, while inside the halal the light is concealed. The Ein Sof, the luminary, Ma'or, whence the light issues, itself is totally unaffected by Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum relates only to the light of the Ein Sof. So what he's saying here is that when God wanted to be king, so in only a part, as it were, you can't really say part, but what withdrew was just the idea, again, what we just explained, just the idea of me as a musician. But I'm still here, I'm entirely here, I'm still practicing, I'm still doing everything. Still here. It can't be that there's a state where God is missing. He's not missing. He's just not on stage. He's not acting as a creator. That's what he's saying here in a lot of words.
Is this after the creation of space or the contraction?
It's a contraction. Don't make a mistake to think that when he was drawn or contracting, that somehow he's not there. On the contrary, so we said the musician's still there. Right, he's still in his apartment practicing.
Yes.
So he himself is totally unaffected by Tzimtzum. In fact, even his dream of becoming a musician is not really affected by the fact that he's not performing on stage now. It's just on hold, but it still exists. In him, it still exists. He still has it. He just has to make a lot of space for that to actually happen. Moreover, even in the light per se, there is no real change whatever. It is neither reduced nor removed, but merely concealed. So again, he says, even while he's practicing, it's not that the dream of becoming a musician is gone. It's still there. It's just, it happens to be that at this moment he's engaged in something else. He's showing something else. But the light that was going to show him as a musician is still there. He's still interested in it. That's why he's practicing in the first place. Even this concealment and occultation is strictly relative to the void and its subsequent contents, without, strictly speaking, affecting the light itself in any way. Moreover, in relation to the void, there is not an absolute and total withdrawal. Some residue or vestige, reshimu of the light remains in the halal. What is he saying? He's saying that even when you talk to this musician while he's practicing, sometimes the stage performer comes out. It's not like it's completely gone. He can bring it out at any second. He's still there. He's taking a break because he wants to practice. He wants to do something else. Despite all these qualifications, meaning limits that we put on our definitions, and the metaphorical interpretation of the withdrawal of the light, this first act of Tzimtzum is a radical leap that creates the possibility for a gradual process and evolution of emanations to take place and to culminate in the creation of finite and corporeal entities. I do not agree with the sentence. It simply is false in my eyes. The first Tzimtzum was not meant to create emanations. That existed anyway. What the first Tzimtzum did was it allowed there to be some kind of physical reality, which does not work by a process of evolution. It's not a great chain. It's yesh me'ain. Yesh me'ain is a completely different concept than hishtalshelus. Two different concepts. He even quoted it before from chapter 20 in Igeres HaKodesh. He quoted it. He said there's two different things. There's the hishtalshelus, these emanations that lead to slow evolution or gradated evolution, and there is something from nothing which is needed in order to create physical reality, the vessels, if you want. In any case, the principal purpose of Tzimtzum is to create a halal, a void in which the divine creatures would be able to exist. I don't know what he means by creatures. It's a word that I always have a hard time with. How do you say bru'im, nivraim? There's no good way to say it, meaning the creation, the bru'ei Hashem, you understand, is a different word than divine creatures. When you say nivraim shel Hashem, what you mean is those creatures created by the divine. And then when you try to say it quickly in English, it comes out as divine creatures. And what do you understand? That it's talking about angels or something. But he's not. He's talking about things that were created. It's just no easy way to say it in English because it's missing.
Divinely created creatures.
Right? So I said, when you say it quickly, divine creatures, it sounds to you like it's the same, but it's not.
Divinely created.
I understand. But when you want to say it, I have this problem all the time when I write. I have exactly this problem. I write divine creatures, and I look at it and I said, but that means like angels or something. That's not what I meant. I meant to say nivraim. Nivraim is something that was created by God, and not something that's divine in itself. Would be able to exist and subsist as opposed to becoming dissolved in the divine omniety, meaning the omnipresence or the totality. In other words, this is another problem that we have. Tzimtzum, we said, is also diminishing. It's not just withdrawal. It also means diminishing something. So dimming the light is a tzimtzum. So if I have a dimmer on my light, that's a tzimtzum. I limit the light. Why do I limit the light? Because the light is too strong. That is a different concept altogether, meaning that I can't tolerate the light because it's too strong, than that I can't exist because God fills everything, because there's no room for me. But that's true anyway. God's always going to be everywhere. So how is it that I exist in the first place? These are problems that need to be dealt with a little bit longer than what he does here. The infinite radiation of the divine light, having been dimmed and concealed, as it were, will now no longer consume and nullify the contents of the halal, the void, in the way, for example, that a spark is totally that a spark is totally consumed and nullified in the flame itself, or the way the light of a candle would be totally absorbed and nullified in the very intense light of the sun. Okay, so there's a lot more to say here, and I thought we could finish it in 20 minutes. We still have 2.5 pages to go, and each one of these things is long. So I guess we'll stop here with this book, which is called The Mystical Concepts in Chasidism, and on Sunday we'll resume our treatment of Machatzit Shekel, and hopefully we'll be able to finish a lot of it before Purim. But it doesn't matter, it's because Machatzit Shekel is not for Purim. Machatzit Shekel is for all of Adar. So we have all of Adar really.